evening, everybody. We are on Daf Vav Amud Aleph 6a, about 10 lines up from the bottom. I'm just going to share on screen. Okay, can everyone see that? Excellent. So we were here. You can see where the cursor is with the word Ella and there's the asterisk. Okay, so you may remember we saw previously on Hey Amud Beis, Gemara said Shiurim. So the Gemara said three things. Shiurim. So it was actually Rav says Shiurim b'chatzitzim machitzim halach l'Moshe Sinai. Shiurim, measurements for certain things, and particularly with the Isurim, things which are forbidden. Chatzitzin, those things which are considered to be something which would invalidate a tefillah, an immersion in a mikveh. Mechitzin and walls. The dimensions of walls, what's considered to be a wall, halacha Moshe Sinai. It was an oral tradition transmitted to Moshe Rabbeinu from God at Har Sinai. It's not written in the Torah explicitly. Yeah. Then we went through the Gemara and said, what do you mean? What do you mean? Shiurim halacha Moshe Sinai. We have a pasuk. Eretz chitza u'sa'ora v'gevim v'ta'ema v'rimoy. Eretz etchem l'davash. The Torah talks about the Yeshivas Haminim, the 7 species, praising the land of Israel, but that pasuk is there to give us various measurements, and we went through each one at a time to show that wheat is the measurement for one thing, and barley is another measurement for another thing, and the vine and figs and dates, etc., are all measurements. So how can you say that measurements are halacha l'Moshe Sinai? We have a pasuk that clearly shows it's min haTorah what these measurements are. So having been through all of them, the Gemara ends off by saying on Vav Amud Aleph, 10 lines from the bottom, here where the cursor is, Ella says the Gemara, you're right. Okay, so we can derive what these shiurim are from a pasuk. However, the truth is the main source is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It was what Moshe Rabbeinu was taught. And that this pasuk is merely a textual support for that halacha. Yeah, remember we talked about this last time that the Gemara does this a lot. The Gemara will say manahani mili. When the Mishnah has taught a halacha, the Gemara will ask, "What's the Torah source for it?" And it'll often quote, it will quote a pasuk, and that we'll see is the source for it. Here we're saying, yes, we have a pasuk, but this pasuk isn't the source of the halacha. The source of the halacha was halacha Moshe Sinai, was from Moshe Rabbeinu, and this pasuk is merely a support for it, but it's not the essential source. Does that make sense? Okay, Gemara continues. Having said that, says the Gemara. Next thing in the Brisa, the Brisa was chatzitzin. What is considered to be an interruption, something which would intervene between a person's skin or whatever part of the body it is, and the water in a mikveh, which means it wouldn't be a kosher tefillah. So says the Gemara, chatzitzin d'oraisa ninhu. Chatzitzin, these interruptions are also found in the Torah. The source is also the Torah. It's not halacha Moshe Sinai. How do we know? Because a pasuk says, "V'rachatz es b'saroi b'mayim." So this time we're actually including what's in the brackets. The one Pesachim actually uses a different pasuk. So "V'rachatz es b'saroi b'mayim." It's talking about them at Tzorah. Somebody who's afflicted with tzoraas, the physical blemishes on their skin. At the end of the period, they have to go to mikveh. And the Torah says, "V'rachatz es b'saro b'mayim." They shall wash their body, their flesh, in water. Look at Rashi, and Rashi is 3 lines up from the bottom of the page on the right-hand side. Yeah, says Rashi, "Hachi garsin" at the beginning of the line, "Hachi garsin b'saro b'mayim." The pasuk says, Rashi is alluding to the fact that there's another, the Goyim Pesachim quotes a different pasuk, but our pasuk says b'saro b'mayim, that he shall wash his body in water, shelo yehi davar chotzes v'chulei, meaning he should wash his body, and meaning nothing should intervene between his body and the water. his body should be able to be washed in the water without anything intervening, anything adhering to the body, for example, a plaster or some sort of dye or something like that stuck to the body, maybe a bit of clay or something stuck to the body. The Torah is saying explicitly that a chatzitza postles a tefillah, that there is anything intervening between the man's skin and his tefillah and the water in the mikveh. It's an invalid tefillah. So again, it's not halacha Moshe Sinai. It's clearly written in the Torah. So says the Gemara. No, this is what we really mean. When we say it's halacha Moshe Sinai, we say shlo yehei davar chotzes beinu levein hamayim. So that's what the Torah is telling us, that there should be nothing intervening between the person's body and the water. So that's what the Torah tells us. Ki atai hilchasa. What does the halacha Moshe Sinai come to tell us? So the basic halacha that there should be no chatzitzas is your right to oraisa. What Rav meant was, when he says that chatzitzin halacha Moshe Sinai, it was in order to tell, it comes to tell us, l'sa'aroi. It's coming to tell us about hair, about chatzitzas in relation to a person's hair. The Torah gives us a source of chatzitzas in relation to a body, but what about a person's hair? What chatzitzas will be considered with a person's hair? Look at Rashi. There's no Rashi yet. It's the next bit of the Gemara. Yeah. So that's halacha Moshe Sinai. The halacha Moshe Sinai is in relation to chatzitzas of a person's hair. Because it says Gemara, K'te Rabba Bar Chana, as Rabba Bar Chana says, the Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Nima Achas Kshura Chotzetzes. Rabba Bar Chana said that if a person has one knotted hair on their head, that's considered to be a chatzitza. It will not allow the water to penetrate the knot, and therefore it's not a kosher tefillah because the water hasn't got to all parts of the hair. Says the Gemara, Shalosh Einun Chotzetzes. However, if three hairs are knotted together, that's not considered to be a chatzit, so we'll see in a minute why. And then says Rabbi Bachana, Shtayim Eini Yodea. But when there's two knotted hairs, I don't know what the halacha is. So let's look at Rashi. Rashi is 3 lines up from the bottom of the page, on the right-hand side. Nima Achas Kashura. So Rabbi Bachana said, the halacha Moshe Sinai is relation to chatzitzas when it comes to hair. One knotted hair is considered to be a chatzitza. Says Rashi, Nima Achas Kashura, one knotted hair, Umakpid Alav, Chotzet says, and if the person is bothered by it, meaning they didn't want, they're not happy that there's a knot in their hair, that's going to be significant. So Mehade Chaper, because one single knotted hair, the knot is going to be very tight. And the water is not going to be able to penetrate to the bit of the hair that's knotted. And we'll see later on that the rabbis made a gezerah decree in relation to a small chatzitza that a person is bothered about. So even though it's one hair that's knotted, since the water can't penetrate this one knot because it's so tight, and the person didn't want their hair to be knotted, that is considered to be an interruption from the contact with water, and it's no good. The immersion is no good. However, look, Karen and Rashi says, Rabbi Bachana, Shalosh Einon Mechotzet says, 3 knotted hairs is not considered to be a chatzitza. Why? Kasha, because the hair is hard. And therefore, it's not going to be as tight a knot. When you've got 3 hairs, 3 quite coarse hairs, knotted together, that's not going to produce such a tight knot as one hair, and the water will be able to penetrate through the knot, and therefore it's not considered to be a chatzitza, an interruption. Okay, and therefore it's a good tefillah. Yeah. So that's what the halacha Moshe Sinai is coming to tell us. the rules in relation to chatzitzas in hair. Says the Gemara. Back in the Gemara, it's about 4 lines up from the bottom now. Here, 4 lines, in the middle of the line. Sa'aroi nami do'oraisa ninhu. Says Gemara, no. Even chatzitzas in relation to hair is also a Torah law. It's not halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. We can find it in the Torah itself. Tichsiv, because the pasuk says the very same pasuk we've just read. It says v'rachas es b'saroi b'mayim. Now the word es in the pasuk in Hebrew is normally there's no direct equivalent in English. It's merely it's there connected to the subject of the sentence. So he shall wash what? His body. Es b'saroi, his body. Yeah? But the word es itself is not translatable. But sometimes we say, well, actually, the es, because it's almost superfluous, it's a grammatical construct, we can darshan something from it, we can derive an halacha from it. So it says, V'rachos es b'saroi, says the Gemara, es hatafel b'saroi, meaning he should what? He should immerse not only his body, but es b'saroi, that which is secondary to his body, something else associated with his body, but which isn't actually his body. Look at Rashi. Es hatafel b'saroi, it's the final Rashi on the page on the right-hand side. Es hatafel b'saroi, yehei b'mayim, something other than his body, in addition to his body, es b'saroi, as well as his body, should be in the water. Hatafel hadavuk, something which is secondary but connected to it. Something which is secondary to the body but attached to it. What would that be? A person's hair. So we see again that the halach in relation to the need to the person's hair needs to be fully in contact with the water without any interruptions, any chatzitzas. That is not halakha l'Moshe b'Sinai. That is a d'oraisa law. It has a, we can find it in the Torah. So the Gemara carries on and says, okay. Says the Gemara. Oh yeah, so the Gemara spells it out. What is that which is secondary to his body? Sa'aro, his hair. Gemara goes on then. Okay, so the pasuk itself is telling us the halakas in relation to a person's hair needing proper tefillah without any chatzis, any interruptions between it and the water. So what is the halakha Moshe Sinai coming for then? Ki asai hilchasa lekad Rabbi Yitzchak. So the halakha Moshe Sinai in this in relation to chatzitzas is in relation to which Rabbi Yitzchak taught. To Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, the Rabbi Yitzchak said, and let's turn it over now to Vav on the base. Hopefully that's changed on the screen. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. So it coming to tell us, Devar Torah, Ruba Umakpid Alav Chotzes. Now, Devar Torah, look at Rashi on the left-hand side. What is Devar Torah? A matter of the Torah. Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. It's another way of saying Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So that what is in relation to chatzitzas? What is the Halacha l'Moshe Sinai? It is the teaching of Rubo Umakpid Alav Chotzes. That when it comes to the definition of a chatzitza, it is that the chatzitza must be on the majority of the hair, and the person must be bothered by it. There has to be 2 factors for it to be considered a chatzitza. So the majority of the hair must be covered by this, whatever it is, this foreign object, and the person themselves must be bothered by it, meaning they don't want this on them. Look at Rashi, for example, the second Rashi on the first line. Ruboi, Rov Sa'aro, Mutunaf, Batit. For example, says Rashi, the majority of the person's hair has been dirtied by tit is like normally like plaster. So sometimes you see builders, decorators. You see decorators, they wear those overalls. I don't know why they wear white overalls. It's always covered in paint, right? You think they should be dark coloured overalls, you won't be able to see them, right? It's like surgeons wearing white clothes and they're all covered in blood. Doesn't really give them much confidence. Anyway, so not only has he got it on his coat, but often you see it, they've got it on their face, they've got paint splatters on their face and in their hair, right? Now, most painters, because they're doing it all the time, they're not particularly bothered by it. But if you've been decorating your own home and you get a bit of a splatter of paint in your hair, and then you've got to go to a mikveh, now we're talking about if it's a small amount, we're going to see, even if you're bothered by it, it's not an issue because it's a small amount. It's a minority of your hair. But let's say the majority of your hair gets covered in paint. So you have a bit of an accident, you're up the ladder, and the tin of paint goes over you rather than over the wall, right? Your hair's covered in paint. Of course, you're going to be upset by it. So we've got the two factors now: ruboy, the majority, and makpid. The halakha Moshe Messina tells us only if you have those two factors would that be considered to be a chatzitza. One or the other, not. Carry on Rashi. So Rashi says, ruboy sa'aro metunaf petit. For example, the majority of a person's hair is covered by something he doesn't like, or kashu achas, or one individual hairs are tied, knotted, umakpid alav chotzetz, and the person is bothered by it, then that's considered to be a chatzitza. Carry on in the Gemara, end of the first line, v'she'enu makpid alav, but when the person isn't bothered by it, then it's not considered to be a chatzitza, even if the majority of their hair is covered by it, because it has to be the two factors. That's what the halakha Moshe Messina is coming to teach us. Look at Rashi, second line of Rashi. Ein makpid alav, havalei kugrufei. Because when the person's not bothered by it, then it's like their own body. Yeah, you can't be whatever your body is. The person can't separate themselves from their body. Their body is whatever their body is, right? So if they've got something on their body and they're not bothered by what that material is, then it's considered to be like their body itself, and therefore it's not considered to be a chatzitza. Since he's not going to remove it anyway, but doesn't bother. He's not bothered. He doesn't care. I don't know. He's got a blood stain on him. He's not bothered going to wash it off anyway. He's not bothered by it. Since he's not going to anyway come to remove it, it becomes bottle, it becomes nullified to the rest of him, and therefore it's not a chatzitza. Yeah. For example, let's take an extreme example. A person's arm is attached to the person. Now, whether the person likes their arm or they don't like their arm, let's for the sake of for example, it makes no difference. They're not going to go detach their arm. I don't like this arm. I'm going to pull it off. I'm going to take their arm off, right? No, it's part of their body. So whether they like it or not, I know, for example, someone's got let's say, for example, a birthmark, more realistic, right? Person's got a birthmark on their skin, right? Now, they might not like it, but they're not going to remove it. So since they're not going to remove it, even if it covers the majority of them, it's considered to be part of their body. It's nullified in relation to the rest of their body. They're not going to end up removing it, and therefore it's not considered to be a chatzitza. Okay, so let's just go over it again. So says the Gemara, Devar Torah. So halakha Moshe Messina, going to the first line again. Ruba umakpid alav chotzetz. What is the rule that halakha Moshe Messina teaches us? That if a person the majority of their hair is covered by something, and they're unhappy about it, that's considered to be a chotzetz, a chatzitza. However, if they're not bothered by it, even though it's a majority, it's not a chatzitza. Now goes on and says, middle of the second line, the gazru al rubo she'enu makpid. However, along came the rabbis and added to it and said, they made a decree, al rubo she'enu makpid, although we've just said up to now that even if it covers the majority of the hair, the person's not bothered by it, it's not a chatzitza. The rabbi said, no, we consider it to be a chatzitza. Why? Mishum rubo umakpid. On account of the halacha, which is majority and bothered. Look at Rashi, fourth of the wide lines of Rashi, the final of the wide lines. The Gazru al Rubo She'enu Makpid. The rabbis extended the prohibition and made a decree and said that a chatzitza would be something which is, if it covers the majority of the person's hair, even though they're not bothered by it, hoel v'havei roiv, since it is the majority of their hair, v'dami b'mixas the chatzitza d'oraisa, it's comparable to a small amount to make it a chatzitza d'oraisa. Since according to the Torah, even a small amount, a person and who the person is bothered by it, that would be a chatzitza. Here the rabbi said, if it's the larger amount, even though they're not bothered by it, we'll extend the definition, the shear of the definition of the chatzitza, and say when there's a majority, the person's not bothered by it, it's also a chatzitza. That's the first half. Carry on in the Gemara. End of the third line. Val miyuto hamakpid, and they made a gezerah when there's only the minority of your hair covered, but the person is bothered by it. Mishum rubo hamakpid, on account of the person who has the majority of themselves covered by it, and they are bothered by it. Look at Rashi, first of the narrow lines in Rashi. Va'al miyuto hamakpid, because now it's comparable to someone who's bothered. Okay, are we clear on that? Let me go over again. Halakha Moshe Sinai was you have to have two factors, both majority and bothered. A lot of rabbis going to say we're going to extend that and say either or. So either majority but not bothered, that's still a chatzitza, or minority but bothered. To either one. So although Halakha Moshe was saying was you need both, the rabbis came on and made a gezerah and extended it because there are comparable elements to both sides, and said either factor will be enough to make a chatzitza. Either it's the majority of your body, regardless of whether you're bothered by it or not, or even if it's a minority, if you are bothered by it, it's also a chatzitza. Does that make sense? What we've done here? Anybody?
So what was this about the birthmark then, which you're bothered by, but it's not a chatzitza, even though you're bothered by it? What?
So the chatzitza would be for the birthmark to be a chatzitza, it would have to be either you're bothered by it, but it's only a minority of your body. So you've got a small birthmark, but it really bothers you. That could be considered to be a chatzitza. I'm not passing halakha here because a birthmark is not something which is separate to you. It's not on top of this. It's not on the skin. It's not separate to the skin. I'll be more talking about. Let's say, for example, something else. Let's say you got ink on your hands. Yeah, you got ink on your hand. You can't get it off, and you need to go to mikveh. Now, it's a small amount of ink comparable to the rest of your body, but it really bothers you. You scrubbed and use that. What was that stuff they used? The mechanics used to get the grease off their hands, right? You couldn't get it off. It's permanent ink. Now, according to the gezerah, even though it's a minority of your body, since you're bothered by it, it's a chatzitza. That's one side. Let's take another side. Let's say you fell into a vat of tar. Majority of your body is covered by it. But you're not bothered. You quite like the smell of tar. Chatzitza or not chatzitza? Based on the gezerah? Chatzitza. Why? Because it's a majority.
Yeah, it's mostly, yeah.
although at the top of the page we said it has to be both factors, majority and being bothered, the rabbis came along and extended and said, we'll take either one.
So
If either,
what's the rationale for the change? If it's there that the law is it's got to be both, if that's what's actually Torah law,
a good question.
what justification do they say of actually no, the Torah laws?
So this idea of, it's a very good point, Jonathan. It's a good question. So the concept of a gezerah, the rabbis were given permission by the Torah itself. The Torah gives permission to rabbis to say, this is Torah law, but we want to protect Torah law, and therefore we're going to extend it. So, for example, you've got, I don't know, you've got a patch of grass. That's the example I always use. You've got a patch of grass you don't want anyone to go on. So you can put a sign up and say, don't go on the grass. Or you can build a fence a bit beyond the grass and build it. That's what the rabbis are doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Torah is given two conditions, or Halacha Moshe Messina in this case is given two conditions. Long time the rabbis say, since there are elements which are comparable to these two on either side, we'll take either or rather than needing both, in order to make sure you never go near the both principle. Yeah. Good question though. But do we understand what they've done here? Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the Gemara asks another interesting question, and also a fundamental question. End of the fourth line says the Gemara, if that's the case, if you've extended it to say either or, we'll take either majority or bothered. It doesn't need to be both. Let's extend it even further and make a gezerah and say that if there's a minority and you're not bothered, so neither factor, let's say there's not majority, nor is there being bothered. Let's say the rabbis extended that as well. That as long as if there's a minority on you, but you're not bothered by it, it still should also be. Why? On account of the fact that we've extended the previous thing and said that when there's a minority and you're bothered, it's a chatzitza. So let's say, if there's a minority and you're bothered, that's a chatzitza. Let's say a minority and you're not bothered, it's a chatzitza, because it has a factor in common of minority. And the other side, inami, says the Gemara, next line here, inami also, alternatively, mishum ruba she'enu makpid, or on account, let's also do this on account of a situation where we've said there's a majority, but you're not makpid because of that. Since in that case we said majority but not makpid is a chatzitza, by extension of the halacha Moshe Messina, the gezerah, well, let's say a minority where you aren't bothered where you aren't bothered should be also a chatzitza because of the case of majority where you're not bothered. So do you understand what the Gemara is saying? Let's extend it even further. So says the Gemara, he gufa gezerah. That's the what you've done now is you've taken the gezerah, the rabbinical decree, and made a gezerah on it. So you've made what's known as a gezerah ala gezerah. So the gezerah was, we'll take either or. You said, okay, either or now. Let's go to a case where there's actually neither of those factors because of one of those factors. Says the Gemara, I'll ask a rhetorical question. Are you really going to establish a gezerah on a gezerah? That we don't do. That you can't do. The rabbis can't make a gezerah on a gezerah. That's going to take you. That's your. You've got the grass. You put the fence around it, and then you build a wall around the fence. That you can't do. That's going too far. That's making life, that's intolerable. There's no end to it. So that you can't do. Okay. So we see that. Yeah, look at Rashi. The first Rashi of narrow lines. Gezerah. So says Rashi, Lav halacha l'Moshe v'Sinayu. The either or scenario is not halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai, ela gezerah mid'Rabbanan. It's a rabbinic decree. V'rubo hamakpid l'chudei hu dahavei halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai. The only aspect of chatzitza which is halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai is when you have both ruboy, majority, and makpid and bothered on it. So only those two. Only that is the halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai. The rest is rabbinical extension. Okay? So we have at least managed to show that there was some aspect of halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai when it comes to chatzitzas. Okay, is that clear? Okay, so the third thing we had, the Rav said, which was halacha l'Moshe v'Sinai, was mechitzas. We're here now in the Gemara, end of the line. This last word on the line. Mechitzin. Walls. Are they halacha Moshe Sinai or not? So it says the Gemara, mechitzin had the amran. That which we said about mechitzas, and it says Rashi legova asara, but they have to be at least 10 tefachim high. You remember we had that whole long discussion about how do we learn the mechitzas of 10 tefachim from the different domains. We say Kodesh Baruch Hu, when it comes down no lower than 10 tefachim, we can't go above 10 tefachim. How do we know that? From the Aron HaKodesh, which we said was 9 tefachim plus the 1 tefach of its cover. Yeah, we've got ourselves in circles on that. The fact that we said it has to be 10, are you going to say that's halacha l'Moshe Sinai? Hanichel Rabbi Yehuda. That's all okay according to Rabbi Yehuda. Now look at Rashi. Rashi reminds us. That's good. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai according to Rabbi Yehuda. To lo nafka lein mikrae it's hilchasa. Because Rabbi Yehuda says no, you can't learn it from the Aron Kodesh because we don't know exactly what measurement of a tefach we were talking about. Was it an amma of 5 tefachim or 6 tefachim? We don't know. So we don't know exactly what the height of that kapores was. Yeah, so it might have been 1.5 tefachim, which would mean that the distance between the top of it and the top of the Mishkan will be different. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, who doesn't hold by the Pesukim in relation to learning the height of mechitzas, it makes sense to say it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Ela Rabbi Meir, my ikalamema. But what are you going to say in relation to Rabbi Meir, who does hold? Rabbi Meir was the one who said we can learn the dimensions of mechitzas from the Aron and the Kapores. So what are you going to how are you going to square what Rav said in relation to Rabbi Meir? Rav said mechitzas are learned halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Rabbi Meir said no, what are you talking about? We learn it from the pasuk. We learn it from the Aron and the Kapores. We don't need the halacha l'Moshe Sinai in this case. So answers Gemara, Michael Neyman. So he says ki asay hilchasa look good. Beloved, what we were saying was, Rabbi was saying the basic dimensions of a mechitza we learn from the posuk, but we need halacha l'Moshe Sinai to tell us 3 very special halachas in relation to mechitzas, and we touched on these quite a while ago. The first one is look good. There are 2 types of good. Good literally means extension. We talked about it briefly. The idea of the walls extending upwards and extending downwards. Once you've got the minimum size for a wall, if it doesn't quite reach the ground, as long as it's less than 3 tefachim off the ground, or it doesn't quite reach the schach, as long as there's less than 3 tefachim between the top of the wall and the schach, we say good achis, so it extends downward, or good asik, or it extends upwards. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai. We don't see anywhere in the Torah that halacha. Look at Rashi. Rashi is here, where the cursor is a moment, about 5-6 lines down in the Gemara on the left-hand side. The first one on the line, look good. Lehechid tzarach lemigad, or good achis. So either you need to extend it or you need to descend it, for example, or asik, you send it upwards. Kugon achasandra de babeka. For example, like some sort of balcony, I think it is, or sort of awning in a valley, where we say that the edge of the tikra of the beam goes down and is complete. So that it's a notionary extension of a beam. Once you have the minimum dimensions, we can say the rest of it notionally descends and creates a full wall by this precision. That concept, that halacha, is halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's the first one. Next one, lovud. See what the asterisk says. Lovud, says Rashi, here in the middle of the line, beloved. Pachos megimel. Lovud literally means, again, also, I don't think what have we translate lovud. Joining up. We also learned, I think, we learned a bit. We know that you have to have, we're going to see this in 3 walls and a bit. So 2 walls and a bit, 2 walls and a bit, 2 full walls and 1 of a tefach. Now, do those walls have to be complete walls, solid walls? It says that we have a principle of lavud, that you can have gaps between the parts of the wall, as long as they're less, pachos says Rashi, pachos megimel tefachim, as long as it's less than, so you've got boards, beams, right? Planks of wood, and there's a gap between them. As long as that gap is less than 3 tefachim, it's considered as if they're actually joined. That gap is so insignificant, it's considered as if it's non-existent. That's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, the concept of lavud, joining up. And the final principle, my favorite principle, is that of dofin akuma, a bending wall. Yeah, it says Rashi, v'dofin akuma, pachos midadat amos. When you have a gap between the schach and the uprights of the wall, so the schach starts here, the walls end there, there's a gap, and you've got solid material from the edge of the walls to where so basically you cut a hole in your roof of your house. The walls are the walls of the sukkah, and the schach will sit in the middle of it, but you've got solid material still there. That's called dofin akuma. The wall is considered to go up and bend across. Yeah. So as long as the bending across bit is less than daled amos, which is quite big, it's around about 6 foot. As long as that's less than 6 foot, that is considered to be a bent wall. That's perfectly okay. Those 3 ideas, those 3 halachas, are halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That Rabbi Meir would accept, and when we said that mechitzas, halacha l'Moshe Sinai, we don't mean the basic dimensions of a mechitza being 10 tefachim. That Rabbi Meir would say you can have from the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda would say no, you need that. It's also halacha l'Moshe Sinai. But he would agree, Rabbi Meir would agree that these very specific, quite unique aspects of halacha in relation to walls are learnt halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Okay, does that all make sense? Good. Okay, we go back to the Mishnah now. The Mishnah, you remember, right at the beginning of the Perek, one of the things it said, it talks about obviously the height of the sukkah, minimum height, maximum height. Then it said what postles a sukkah. V'she'ein la shlosh tefanos. If a sukkah doesn't have 3 walls, it's also postel. So how do we know that? It says the Gemara, Tana Rabbanim. Tana Rabbanim, it's also in the Brisa. Shtaim kilchasan, v'shlishis afilu tefach. When we say 3 walls, we mean, according to the Brisa, 2 walls, according to halacha, and the 3rd one, even if it's just a tefach. Look at Rashi. What does it mean, kilchasan, according to halacha? Rashi is, you see the here, see where the right angle is in the Rashi. The last word here, Kihil Chasan. I'll come on to that while that's there in a moment. Diagram. It says Rashi, Kihil Chasan, what does it mean according to the halacha? Kishur Meshech Sukkah. The measurement of the length of a sukkah, or the height of a sukkah. Yeah, or the length, width, yeah. We know that's 7 tefachim. The minimum width of the wall is 7 tefachim. So as long as you've got 2 of those, 2 7 tefachim walls, and 1 even as a tefach, it's fine. That's the chachamim. Says the Gemara, next line, Rabbi Shimon Omer, so Reish Shimon Omer, Shalosh Hilchasan, B'Revius Afilu Tefach. Says Rabbi Shimon, no, you actually need 3 walls, full walls, so 3 walls of 7 tefachim each, and the 4th wall can be even as little as a tefach. So you have a straight machlokus between the Tanakh, between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon. The Rabbanan will say 2 and a bit. Rabbi Shimon will say 3 and a bit. Says the Gemara, what is the source of the dispute between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon? How did they come up with something so different, 2 or 3? Says the Gemara, Rabbanan Savrei, Yesh Eim L'Masores. Now this is a fascinating piece of Gemara. I think we also learned this also once in Makos. So the Rabbanan of the opinion, this is all based on what you give precedence to. Now we know that we have, and this very much touches on this idea of Halacha Moshe Sinai. We know we have the Torah Shebeksav, we have the written Torah, we have the text of the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu transmitted to us. So we know how the Torah is written and how it should be read. That's the Mikra. Yesh Ein the Mikra. So the rabbis say we give precedence to the way that the Torah is read. Sorry, let me get this clear again. Sorry. Rabbanan Sabri, sorry. Go back again. Rabbanan Sabri is here. Let's skip down the line. Yeah, what are they arguing about? Rabbanan Sabri. The rabbis of the opinion, Yesh Eim L'Masores. We give precedence to the transmitted text that we have. Rabbi Shimon Savar, whereas Shimon is the opinion, Yesh Eim L'Mikra. No, we give precedence to the way it's read, meaning how you vocalize it. So, as we know, the Torah that we've got doesn't have any vowels in it. That's based on Masorah. But which one do you give precedence over? The way that it's read, the way it's written, or the way it's read? And a word can be read in maybe 2 different ways. I'll give you an example. The Torah says, I think we'll read it either this week or next week. Ushmartem et hamatzos. You shall guard the matzahs. What is that? Well, the halacha is they shouldn't become chometz, meaning when you make matzah, you have to be careful that it doesn't become chometz, meaning you don't allow too much time. However, the word matzos is spelt in exactly the same way as the word mitzvahs. In fact, the Gemara makes a drush on that. So you can read it as Ushmartem et ha-matzos or Ushmartem et ha-mitzvos. You should guard the mitzvahs or you should guard the matzahs.
I think that was
sorry?
This week. I think that was Bo.
Yeah, we have it this week, Cedra?
Yeah.
I thought your word for it, you named it. Okay, yeah. So how did you know how to say it as matzos and rather than mitzvahs? Because we know, obviously we have printed versions, but we have Masorah, we have a tradition that when the word can be written one way, but it can be pronounced, it has to be pronounced a certain way. Otherwise, it gives be different meaning. But which one do you give precedence to in terms of deriving halachas from? Look at Rashi. Rashi probably explains it much better than I can. In fact, I'm sure he does. Says Rashi, Yesh here, Yesh Eim L'Masorah. So this is the Rabbanan. They say we give precedence to the Masorah. What says Rashi? Kamash Kasav Moshe. The way Moshe wrote it, Umasa b'Sefer Torah Yisrael, and then transmitted it to the Jewish people in the Sefer Torah. Hi ha'eim va'ika. That is the essential and most important part. V'loi kamo shehu nikra, and not how it's read. According to the Rabbanan, the most important thing is the way it's written, because that's what we have in our hands. We are Dana, right? We can see it in front of us. That's how it's written. That's the most important thing. Whereas the rabbis would say, no, Most important thing is the way it's read. Now, how does it have a practical application in relation to Sukkah? Let's look at the Gemara. Gemara goes on. Rabbi Shimon Savar, take Rabbi Shimon first. So Rabbi Shimon Savar, here we are with the asterisk. Rabbi Shimon was the opinion, Yesh Aim Lemikra. Rabbi Shimon said that you give precedence to, no, sorry, I've jumped a line again. It's my fault. Right, we go back to Rabbanan again. We are dealing with Rabbanan first. Next line. Rabbanan Savre Yesh Aim Masoros. Okay, the rabbi said we give precedence to the way the Torah is written. And we have written in relation to the mitzvah of Sukkah, Basukos, Basukos, Basukos. Look at Rashi. I'll keep my finger on the place here. You see the Rashi here? Says Rashi, Basukos, the Pasuk says, Basukos Teshvu Shivas Yamim. You shall dwell in Sukkahs for 7 days. Yeshu Basukos. They shall dwell in Sukkahs. Why? Ki Basukos Hoshavtes B'nei Yisrael. Because says God, I cause the Jewish people to dwell in Sukkahs. Says Rashi, Chad Male, V'treyin Chaserin. Once the word Sukkah is written full, and twice it's written missing. Meaning, go back in the Gemara. The first two occurrences, you've got 4 letters in the word, and the third one is 5 letters. That vav is the plural. Basukos in sukkahs in the plural. Basukot, you could read the first two as singular. So says the Gemara, Harekan Arba. Says the Gemara, those 3 occurrences of the word, the way they're written, give us 4. Because you've got 1 Basukot, 2 Basukot, Basukos with the vav, 3 and 4. Because the word, when it's written in the plural, the minimum plural is 2. So if it's written in the plural, we count it as 2. When it's written in the singular without the vav, we count it as 1. So in total, because we've got 3 occurrences of the word, 2 in what appears to be singular, the third time what appears to be plural, we have 4 occurrences of the word sukkos. Now, what do we derive from that? Dalchad says Umara, Dalchad legufai, -1 for the sukkah itself. So you need 1 word of the word sukkah to tell you need a sukkah at all. That leaves us pashu lehe tlata. That leaves you 3 occurrences of the word. Shtayim, which takes us shtayim pilchasan, which means 2 walls, according to halacha, meaning 2 full walls. And along comes halacha Moshe Sinai and tells us the 3rd wall only needs to be a tefach. So we have, almost instantly now, we have a combination of Torah law and halacha Moshe Sinai. So the Torah law, based on precedence given to the written text, gives us 4, 1 for sukkah itself, then it leaves us with 3. 2 for the full wall, and the 3rd one, halacha Moshe Sinai, is even a tefach. V'ukmei a tefach, and then we established that it means even if it's just a tefach. So that's the rabbi's position. The rabbi said you need 2 full walls and 1 of a tefach. 2 full walls based on the fact that we've got 2 occurrences of the word sukkah in the posuk. The 3rd one we've got halacha Moshe comes along and reduces it down to a tefach. For Rabbi Shimon, go back in the Gemara. The end of the line, Rabbi Shimon, here it is, Rabbi Shimon Sava, Yesh Eim the Mikra. Whereas Rabbi Shimon would give precedence to the way the Torah is read. And that is, it would sound like this, as I said, Basukos, Basukos, Basukos. So although it's written without the vav, the way it's vocalized is as if it has the vav there. Because a vav can act as, when I'm teaching kids to read Hebrew, you've got the cholam on top of the word. Yeah, the oth sound. Now that can either be floating on its own above a letter or sitting on top of a vav. Either way, it could be as if the vav is there, even if it's not written. If we're giving precedence to the way the word is read, we know the word is read basukos with an oi sound, with a cholam sound. It's as if it's been written with the vav, and therefore it's as if it's in the plural. Basukos, basukos, basukos. How many is that? Says the Gemara. Harekan sheish. That's 6. See where we are by the asterisk. Harekan sheish. Yeah, because you've got 3 plural words of sukkah, sukkos. Each one a minimum of 2. 3 times 3, even I can do that. That's 6. Dal chad kra legufai. Take one away for the mitzvah of sukkah itself. So one is teaching us the mitzvah of sukkah. Hashulei arba. That leaves you, take one word away to teach the mitzvah of sukkah itself. That leaves you with 4. 2 words sukkahs in the plural, minimum 4. Therefore, shalosh kilchasan, 3 walls, full walls according to halacha, meaning the right sides. Atay hilchasav v'g'arata l'revi'is v'ukmantal atayfach. And along comes halacha l'mishna Sinai, reduces the 4th wall down to a tefach. So that's why Rabbi Shimon is of the opinion that you need 3 full walls and 1 of a tefach, because you've got the word in theory written, or 6 occurrences of the word sukkah. Take one of those away because you need that for the mitzvah itself. That leaves you 4 occurrences. Sorry, take 1 word away. That leaves you 2 words in the plural, 2, which gives you 2 sukkahs each. That's 4 in total. He would say 4 walls is necessary, 3 full according to halacha, and 1 according to halacha Mishnah Sinai as only a tefach. Yeah, look at Rashi. Rashi, we saw Rashi. Yeah. It says Rashi here, basukos, here, at the end of the line. Basukos, the way it's written there, without the vav, mashma chada, says Rashi, that implies 1, according to the Rabbanan, because they're giving precedence to the way it's written. And then we said, one of those occurrences, both Rabbi Shimon and Tanakama and the Rabbanan would agree, you need 1 of those words, and you need to teach you the body of the mitzvah itself, that you need a sukkah. L'gufai to ein darshan techilo. Says Rashi, we have a principle which is you never darshan, you never expound on the first occurrence of a word in the pasuk. So since the word is written 3 times, the first one you can't say, well, let's use that to teach us something, because that's there for its real purpose, for the peshat purpose, the simple purpose of telling you that you should dwell in sukkahs. So you can't use that one. Therefore, Posach hanema rishon ein darsha. When something's written the first time in the posuk, you don't expound on it. Ella lemashma e'ata. Rather, it comes to tell you the very fact, which is you need to have a sukkah. However, the rest allow us to darshan it. We've got two. If you look in the margin here. I don't know if you've got that in your Gemara here, but if you can just see that there, I'll read it to you. It says the Masoros Hashas. V'afagav the phonos lo ikre sukkah. You can ask the question. Hold on a second. The Torah has used the word sukkah. Now, why are we now using that to mean the word wall? Sukkah. Oh, maybe schach you could talk about, because that's the definition of a sukkah. It has to have schach, and we saw that previously. The definition of a sukkah is the schach. How can you now use that to say, well, that's teaching us about the number of walls from the word sukkah? So it says in the Masoros Hashas, v'afagav the phonos lo ikre sukkah. So although the pasuk doesn't talk about walls, it says sukkah. Mikol makom miyasura dekrai yalfinan v'defanos. The fact that the Torah seems to have said the word sukkah extra time superfluously, from that we can derive it can't be talking about sukkah because it's already told us. We've already got that once. we've now got two more occurrences of the word sukkah. It can't be talking about the sukkah. So we've already learned about the need for a sukkah in general. Therefore, it must be telling us something specific. What can it be telling us specifically? That must be something about the walls. According to the rabbis, that is that you need to have two walls and a bit. According to Rabbi Shimon, you need three walls and a bit. Go back in Rashi, then we said Hilchasa. So the posuk itself tells us, according to the rabbis, 2 full walls and a bit. According to Rabbi Shimon, 3 full walls and a bit. Along comes Halacha Moshe Sinai and reduces the 3rd or 4th wall, however you look at it, to a tefach. Says Rashi, Hilchasa, Hada Arinin Le'el Halacha Moshe Sinai. That should be said previously about Halacha Moshe Sinai. Lahachi Nami Itmalei Hilchasa, the Mechitzas, the Migrayosa, the Migreya, the Shlishis. And here we are learning Halacha Moshe Sinai in relation to walls. So when we learned previously that Halacha Moshe Sinai tells us something about walls, not the minimum dimensions of it, but 3 things: good, about extension up and down, about lovud, about joining up, and about dofen akuma. Those are all halacha Moshe Sinai in relation to walls. There's another thing halacha Moshe Sinai tells us, which is when you've got 2 or 3 full walls, the 3rd one only needs to be a tefach. That's another aspect of walls taught by halacha Moshe Sinai. Megruzah dofen sukkah the misage le b'tefach, says Rashi. It's coming to tell us that for a wall, it's for the 3rd wall of the sukkah, it's enough to have a tefach. That is a halacha Moshe Sinai. So we're combining both Torah Ksav and halacha Doraisa law and halacha Moshe Sinai. Okay. Okay, so we see a fundamental difference between the rabbis and Shimon based on how you read the posuk. What do you give precedence to? If you give precedence to the way the Torah is written, you read just basically what's there, and if it's written in what looks to be the singular, then you read it as the singular, then you take it to be the singular. However, if you give precedence to the way it should be read, and the way that word should be read, the way it should be vocalized, is that it gives it it makes it into the plural. Then you can actually say you'll need more walls than you would if you read it the other way. Does that make sense? So it's a really big, interesting difference that could actually result from what you give precedence to. Let's do a little bit, tiny bit more. So it says the most. So we said the source of the dispute.
Sorry, just to clarify, if it's according to Rameh, then it's 6 walls from sukkos, sukkos, and sukkos, and Reb Shimon says sukkas, sukkas, and sukkos. So there's 4, not 6 walls. I mean, there's 6 uses of the word sukkah.
Yeah. The word sukkah. The word The number of times the word sukkah is mentioned according to Rabbi Shimon would be 6, because each of those words is written, it is read in the plural.
As is plural, yeah.
It is plural. We take one occurrence of that word away, which is 2 mentions of the word sukkah. Therefore, you're left with 2 occurrences of the word sukkah in plural, sukkos, which gives you 4 mentions in total. He would say that means you need 4 walls. 3 full ones and 1 of a tefach. Halacha Moshe Sinai reduces the 4th one. Let's say in both cases, Halacha Moshe Sinai reduces the final wall to a tefach. In the case of rabbis, that would be the 3rd wall. In relation to Rabbi Shimon, that would be the 4th wall.
So that's the difference, because then if it's the other way around, sukkas, sukkas, and sukkos, that's when you get to 2 and a bit walls.
Yes, because then, according to Rabbanan, you've got 2 singular occurrences and 1 plural occurrence. The 1, 2, 3, 4. 4
One of
occurrences.
them is for sukkahs, yeah.
Take 1 away, so all you've got left is 3.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 2, he would say 4 walls, and the final one is the tefach.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But really interesting how you can come up with completely different halacha based on what you give precedence to, the way you read the word, or the way you read the way the word was written, or the way you read it. Yeah, let's just finish off a tiny bit more. Says the Gemara, having said that, because we asked, our question was, perhaps that's what the dispute between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon is. And it's all based on what you give precedence to. Says the Gemara, let me just find it again. V bias says Gemara, yeah, end the line here. The E bias aimer. However, if you want to say, says Gemara, the kuli alma yesh aim the mikra. If you want to say, actually, no, they all agree, both the Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon agree that we give precedence to the way the Torah is read. And actually, this is what they're arguing about. Ma Sava, one of them holds, Sechaka Ba'ikra, that the schach itself needs one of those words in the posuk. Uma Sava Sechalo Ba'ikra. Whereas one would say, no, the schach itself doesn't need a posuk. Now, which one would say that schach needs a posuk? The Rabbanan or Rabbi Shimon? The Rabbanan, yes. Because then, if you've got, so according to the Rabbanan, you've got 4 occurrences of the word schach. One, I'll do it this way around. One you need for sukkah. One you need for schach. That leaves you just with 2 occurrences, therefore 2 full walls, and the third one, halach lo mishmisinai. Whereas the one who'd say, no, you don't need a posuk for schach, that was still with 4 occurrences. No, excuse me. We're going, everyone's agreeing, yesh em the mikra. Everyone's saying we give precedence to, we're suggesting now that everybody agrees, Rabbanan and Rabbi Shimon agree, we give precedence to the way it's read. How many in total of the way it's read? 6. 6. Let's do it again. Everyone agrees there's 6 occurrences. 1 is for sukkah itself. Rabbis would say you need another one for schach. That leaves you with only 4.
4 walls, 3 and a bit.
No, sorry, it's not working out, has it? No, it must be the other way around. Rabbi Shimon would say, so let's go back. Rabbi Shimon would say that you need, so we've got 6. Well, so that doesn't work. Let me have a look at Rashi, 1 second. So that's why you need Rashi. Rashi comes to the rescue. Look at Rashi. So one of them holds you don't need a posuk for Rashi for schach. Why? The Dashmi Utsa the Gufe Nafkamik the Sukkah. Lo schach lo mikrai. Says Rashi, the one occurrence of one of the occurrences, the word sukkah, we use in order for the mitzvah itself of sukkah. What is by definition of sukkah? A structure that has schach. Because without the schach, it's not called a sukkah. You can have as many walls as you like, as high as you like, as low as you like, as wide as you like, whatever, made out of whatever you want. But unless it's got schach on top of it, it ain't a sukkah. Right? So by definition, one of those occurrences of the word sukkah is, according to one opinion, you need it. You do need it to teach you. According to the other opinion, so let's go back. Who would say that you don't need the word sukkah to teach you schach? That must be we're giving precedence to the way it's read. That means there are 6 occurrences. Yeah? 1 you need for the mitzvah itself. Yeah, that leaves you with 4. Yeah, because that's one occurrence of the word. We've got 6 occurrences. I'm tying myself to knots here. If you're going to say we go precedence of the way it's read, then it's 3 plural words, right? Which is 6 in total. Take one of those occurrences away, that leaves you with 4. Yeah? According to one of those opinions, we've now got 4. Sukkos. 4 occurrences, the word. One of them holds, you need one of those for
Schach.
All you've got is 3. Therefore,
3 4 walls and a bit.
2 4 walls and a tefach. According to the other opinion, you don't need that one for schach because that's by definition what sukkah is. So you're left with 4, 3 4 walls and the tefach. That's Rav Shimon. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll leave it there. We'll go over that next time. So I need to sort of get my clear in my mind again. We'll go over that again. But you see, again, a different way of looking at it in terms of how you end up with how many walls. Yeah. Okay, so we'll go from there next time. Okay.